Hello and welcome to the GrapeSEED Official Podcast. We're back for GrapeSEED Greatest Hits number 3, and our guest for this one is Dan, who we haven't had on for quite a while. He was on some of the Open the Box podcasts, I think units 7, 9, 11, and 13, and then he was on a 10 Things podcast, number 28. So if you haven't heard those, go back and check them out after this one, but welcome back to the show, Dan.
Great hearing from you again, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So just like with Jody, I let you choose 2, and I chose 1 here for our GrapeSEED Greatest Hits. And we'll start with your choices. First up, we have What Do You See from Unit 11?
Yeah, this one's really fun. I really enjoy What Do You See? One of the reasons I really got into this one with teaching the kids is, we really start to get practicing the prepositional phrases, like off and on and in. And it's not their first exposure to it. As you know, they get a chance to see that and give it to a friend from Unit 3, which, as I recall, Jody spoke about as well, because it is really quite an impactful thing. It gives a lot of context that we can use in our classroom outside of just the material itself. It's a lot of fun for them.
Yeah, so even that Unit 3, like you mentioned, but even going back to Unit 1, for example, with Mouse in the Barn, there's so many prepositional phrases there that this material just continues to build off of that with a lot more complexity. We see words like beside or by that are a little bit more tricky for students to understand rather than just on or around like in Unit 1. But because we've built that foundation in the past, they're able to understand it better here.
Yeah, understand it and use it, right? I mean, one of the benefits of this material is we're able to really set up our classroom for discovery, and it can change daily. Just putting, something above the door and asking them, what do you see on top of the door or on top of the table? And it can just easily change from day to day, but it gets the students involved and using the language in a way that maybe in their first couple of exposures in the first units, they weren't able to verbalize it as much as they are now.
And if we think about just the growing progression of learning that our students have in most materials in GrapeSEED, usually in the early exposures, we're just expecting very simple responses, maybe one-word answers, and we're trying to, by the end of the unit, build to full sentence answers. But with something like this material here, where students have had a lot of practice with prepositional phrases already, we can expect a little bit more from them in the beginning. So as opposed to just one-word answers, we can expect even short prepositional phrases, even short sentences from students in the beginning, but we still want to build to full complex sentences by the end of the unit, which is reflected in the quick checks.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the lesson plans will help us reinforce and build upon that. And we do get to see those results, especially if you're one of those lucky teachers who taught your students in their first 5 units, and now you're able to continue that here. You really get to see their growth and how they're able to start using it.
Absolutely. Let's jump in closer to the actual material itself. So when we're looking at the teaching cards, I want to highlight card 2, for example. What do you see between the rocks? Okay. If you're just trying to pick up this material and teach it without practicing or without really looking at the pictures, I can almost guarantee you you're not going to point to the right place. So grab this material before you start teaching. Really think through, okay, where is it indicating? Where do I actually need to point? Another good example is card 1's off the beach. You really want to be looking at these cards, determining where the correct pointing is so you're not fumbling with it and looking not very confident in front of your students when you're teaching this in the real world.
Yeah, that's a great point, but especially when looking at most of the cards here, the field of depth has a lot to do with where you're going to be pointing as well. So I think that's a really good point of, as always, knowing your lesson plans and being prepared with your gestures and your pointing, just so that you're making sure even from the first exposure, it's accurate and you're not having students unlearn if you showed them the wrong one the first time.
Exactly. Because if you're in exposure 1 pointing to one place, they're going to remember that. So when you try to point somewhere else in exposure 2, try to switch it up on them, they're probably going to call you out on it and be a little bit confused. So just have it right from the get-go and you'll be good.
Great point.
One pronunciation note here, seal on a sail. If you're not a native speaker of English, it might be a little tricky. Make sure to practice that so you're really clear in how you're saying it. Even as a native speaker, those two words can sound very similar if you're kind of rushing through it. So just be really clear with your pronunciation with your students when you get to seal on a sail, and you'll be all right.
Can I add one thing as well that one other point I'd like to bring up that I enjoyed
Absolutely.
with this is near the end of the unit, I think with this one, it's a great opportunity to start pairing the students off once they've had enough practice and exposure so that they can start asking each other these questions and, kind of playing it like I spy a little bit. And what do you see pointing in the classroom? And they get a chance to use that language and see things that are around them and not just always directed by the teacher. And it turns into, as chants are, opportunity to use the language authentically.
Absolutely. This is even highlighted in the lesson plans themselves. If we're looking at lesson 30's lesson plan, for example, it says, in 2 groups, have class take turns asking and answering questions. Ask, what do you see between you and me? What do you see by the door? So even from the start of the unit, you're aiming to get kids here and able to do these things. You're laying the groundwork to get to pair interaction, like Dan is suggesting.
Goodbye, my friends, goodbye. I'm sad to say goodbye. It was a good day, but now I will say goodbye, my friends, goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.